Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome into another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Thursday, March 25th, and you know what that means. We are 1 week away from opening day, April 1st, next Thursday. We get action that is live, regular season action on time for the first time since 2019, and I could not be more excited to get this year underway. It's a ton of fun to talk to you guys during the offseason, discuss all the moves, what's going on, roster battles, what we think's going to happen. But when that regular season hits and we get to talk about actual meaningful baseball, it certainly is a lot more fun. But with that said, we got another fantastic episode lined up for you guys here today. We're going to give you an injury update across Major League Baseball. There have been some recent news, both good and bad, depending on which team you're rooting for out there. We're also going to get into the top-ranked players list that ESPN recently released. I'll give you guys my hot takes, my feedback, my reactions on those rankings, and ultimately what I would change. Then I'm going to give you an update on the college baseball season one more time here before we get into regular season action, letting you guys know how the college landscape continues to evolve as they cruise right along here about a month or so into their season. And then finally wrap things up talking about spring training, where things stand, and ultimately who's going to win these leagues. Not that it much matters. Like I said, the Phillies are Grapefruit League champions 2 years ago and then went to finish under 500 and didn't qualify for the playoffs. But still a lot of fun to see where everybody's at, how the teams are doing, who the surprises, who the disappointments are, and let you guys know where everything currently stands. So, jumping right into today's episode, talking about injuries across Major League Baseball. Like I said, some not-so-good news to start out with here, and it was a tough day for the Blue Jays this week, or a tough week, I guess I should say, because George Springer, Robbie Ray, and Kirby Yates all dealing with issues now. And if you're the Blue Jays, like I mentioned, opening day 1 week away, this is not what you want to be dealing with when you're trying to figure out your roster coming down the stretch here. So, starting out with George Springer, he finally had an MRI due to lingering oblique tightness, and this MRI revealed a grade 2 oblique strain, which means he is going to be shut down for the next couple of days, maybe upwards of a week, and then be reevaluated. General Manager Ross Atkins did say that Springer's symptoms are, quote, encouraging, and they are hopeful that he could be ready for opening day. But oblique injuries are nothing to mess around with, and if they can linger for weeks, months on end here, you definitely don't want that going into the regular season. So if I'm a Blue Jays fan, I would not be opposed to sitting Springer down for a week or two here and making sure he is close to 100% healthy when he finally comes back and re-enters the lineup. But your biggest offseason acquisition, center fielder, paying the guy $25 million a year, that's certainly not what you want to hear as you're starting up the season, having one of your biggest bats in the middle of that lineup or the top of that lineup, possibly missing time here early on. Next, we got Robbie Ray. Robbie Ray's been very good this spring, surprisingly. Coming off a tough year last year, he actually signed for more money than I thought he would get coming into this year, and he's been fantastic this spring. But he now has a bruised left elbow. People are saying it's a fluke injury because he slipped and fell carrying his kids down the stairs. Now, if you guys have been around here, last year during the shutdown, I talked to you about the most ridiculous injuries over the course of the history of baseball. Well, add Robbie Ray to the list. Of course, you want to protect your kids, and I'm sure that's what he was doing as he slipped and fell, probably thought less about his own safety and much more about that of his kids. But slipping and falling down the steps and bruising your pitching elbow is certainly not what you want to have here. So he's going to miss his next start. He'll probably throw a bullpen session here in the next couple of days to kind of test that elbow, see where we're at, and based on kind of that bullpen, they'll determine if he's going to be ready for opening day or not moving forward. But the most serious injury out of them all is Kirby Yates for the Blue Jays. It is said that he will, quote, most likely need Tommy John surgery, which will mean he will miss the entire 2021 season. He was originally diagnosed with a flexor pronator strain in his throwing arm, but after a multitude of tests, continuing evaluation, it is looking like he is going to need Tommy John, which, again, could upturn that bullpen and put guys in roles that they weren't exactly programmed for or penciled into as little as a couple of weeks ago. So Kirby Yates probably going to need Tommy John and miss the entire 2021 season in what is a tough blow for Blue Jays fans out there. Next, we got Fernando Tatis Jr. He left Tuesday's game with some shoulder discomfort. He made a play defensively out in the fields, came up, shoulder was feeling a little bit funky. He was going to be reevaluated later this week. He also was holding his hip as he was coming out, so his whole body pretty much got banged up, making a nice defensive play. But this one I don't think is serious based on reactions, communication, feedback from the Padres. Looks like he just got banged up here a little bit, and give him a couple of days off, and he should be able to return to action and not miss any time when it comes to the regular season beginning next week. So good news if you're a Padres fan, but certainly a time to hold your breath there as your new $300+ million man making a nice play defensively, coming up a little bit limp and shoulder and hip discomfort. So he should be good to go, though. Chris Davis, the designated hitter for the Rangers, he also left the game earlier this week with a left quad strain. He's going to have a couple of days off. He was running out a bunt attempt or a bunt single and strained the quad. So again, he headed to the training room. They're going to try to stretch him out and see ultimately how much time he is going to miss. And for the Rangers offensively, not having much outside of Joey Gallo, this could certainly be a hit to their chances to be a potential surprise team when it comes to the AL West and, really not losing 100 games, which it certainly seems Texas is destined to do. But, Davis was hitting 194. He had 2 home runs in 12 games so far this spring, so wasn't exactly hitting the cover off the ball, and now he's going to have to miss some extended time due to that quad, and potentially, that may be one of the better injuries when it comes to a designated hitter. Yes, he's not going to be able to turn a single into a double or a double into a triple, but when you're rotating, when you're torquing, and you have that amount of force, the quad could be a little bit better for you than an oblique, such as Springer, just due to the twisting, violent motion of the swing. So I think Davis will be okay after a week or two, and that one doesn't seem too serious. Kyle Freeland, a left-handed pitcher for the Rockies, he left his start early this week in the 3rd inning after suffering a left shoulder strain. He certainly looked to be in pain after throwing a pitch and came out of the game. And that's not what you want to see, right? I've had that injury myself in my career. I remember college, high school, there was one time where I was working on a bullpen. I threw one pitch and boom, there went the elbow. I tried to throw one more pitch. Same thing, walked off the mound, flicked the ball to the coach and said, I'm done. And he goes, what are you talking about? You just started. I said, no, something went on me there. I'm done. So it wasn't kind of a built-up injury, so to speak, whether it's a muscle or fatigue or kind of like a dead arm syndrome. When you have that one pitch that ultimately leads to that pain, it's usually not good feedback when it comes to what's happening. So shoulder strain, personally, rotator cuff, labrum, all of those things up in the shoulder, the labrum being more in the front of the shoulder. The rotator cuff usually leads to more pain in the back of the shoulder. It doesn't say what's going to happen. I'm sure we'll get an MRI here soon for Freeland. But he's been good in spring training, a 2.00 ERA in his last 3 outings. That's going to be a tough loss for the Rockies, who are another team that doesn't exactly have the depth to, lose somebody like Freeland and continue to compete moving forward. For the Diamondbacks, you have Zach Gallen and Tyler Clippard, both dealing with some issues. Gallen was scratched from his start earlier this week due to right lateral forearm soreness. So he felt discomfort actually when he was swinging and not throwing, which is kind of fascinating for a pitcher, working on some hitting there. But team announced after further diagnosis he has a hairline stress fracture in his right forearm. So he can continue to play catch at a low stress level while he's recovering. But he's going to get treatment for the next 7 to 10 days and kind of see how his arm bounces back. And if ultimately he's going to be able to continue and be ready for early in the season here in April. Tyler Clippard has a capsule sprain in his right shoulder, and he's going to be shut down for 6 weeks. So he's one of the more serious injuries we've seen, at least by initial diagnosis. In 6 weeks, if you're shut down for 6 weeks, that's through the end of April, beginning of May. You're going to need probably 2 to 3 weeks to ramp back up to get your velocity, get your stamina back to where it needs to be. So you're looking at minimum 6 to 8 weeks here if you're Tyler Clippard, which means you're missing the months of April and May and possibly upwards of 50, 60 games for the Diamondbacks. And I know the Diamondbacks had aspirations of challenging the Padres, the Dodgers out there, the Giants for that potential wild card. But being out without Tyler Clippard, certainly not a positive as spring training's coming to a close here. Also with the Rangers, Jose Lecroc. He has returned after experiencing elbow soreness and discomfort. He's expected to miss serious time, but he's working his way back. So it'll be interesting to see. General Manager Chris Young said, they don't have a timetable for him, but he's beginning his rehab process and trying to get back as soon as possible for the Rangers. Franklin Barreto of the LA Angels. He seems to be the favorite to make the opening day roster as the utility man. Him and Luis Renfrigo are going at it here. But Barreto was diagnosed with right elbow inflammation, which is going to keep him out 4 to 6 weeks. So certainly he was the leader in the clubhouse to make that opening day roster, but it doesn't look like anymore that he's going to be available for them in April. Potentially could come back in May, but that opens a roster spot for somebody else out there in L.A. and hurts their depth a little bit as they're trying to have themselves a nice season. Chris Davis for the Baltimore Orioles. He has a lumbar strain, and they're considering putting him on the 60-day injured list. This would keep him out through the month of May. Again, it's one of those where maybe he's ready in 45, 50 days, but if you're close enough to that 60-day mark, teams will typically put you on that injured list just to give you extended time to be able to come back, begin your rehab through the minor leagues. At that point, they would be playing when it comes to the month of May. They've been pushed back from April to May, so that would allow Davis to get some at-bats as he gets comfortable. But it looks like he's going to open the year on the injured list and not just the 10-day, but potentially that 60-day injured list for Chris Davis and the Baltimore Orioles. Now for the Philadelphia Phillies. They got a handful of guys here. I mean, JT Realmuto, he's the biggest one. And he was scratched from a game earlier in the week, but then did make his spring training debut, in which his first at-bat, he hit a home run. So that was nice to see as a Phillies fan and somebody who's going to be in the middle of the lineup. He hasn't lost that power due to his thumb, but they're slowly going to bring him back. He'll be behind the dish here in the next couple of days, trying to get his reps and actually catching. Now, again, it's his throwing hand, so he's been able to receive for bullpens. But that throwing and that arm strength is what he's going to have to build back up here because he hasn't been able to throw the ball down to second, first, working on pickoffs, snap throws, all of that good stuff. So his arm strength is probably going to be the last thing to come around. He's been able to swing a little bit. He's been able to catch, but hasn't been able to throw here for the last 4 to 5 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how that arm bounces back. Next, you got Zach Eflin, Spencer Howard, and Vince Velasquez. All of these guys been dealing with back issues, but Eflin and Howard both threw bullpens earlier this week. Velasquez was scheduled to do the same, and it'll be interesting to see ultimately how they respond and if they have any setbacks here because, again, Eflin looks to be ready to go Game 3, according to Joe Girardi for the regular season. Spencer Howard, Vince Velasquez, both on the roster bubble. Are they in the bullpen? Are they long relievers? Are they 5th or 6th starters? Which direction are they going there? And obviously the health is going to be a big key into ultimately the Phillies deciding what the back end of that rotation looks like. G-Man Choi and Brent Honeywell for the Rays. Choi still dealing with that right knee inflammation. Doesn't look like he's going to be ready for opening day, even though he has resumed baseball activities this week. But the Rays are not going to rush him back, just trying to get him ready for the opener there April 1st, and it looks like he may miss about a week or so. Brent Honeywell, he pitched against another team for the first time since 2017 earlier this week, and he's going to throw once again against the Red Sox here in the coming days. He's Tampa Bay's number 20 ranked prospect, and he's undergone 4 elbow surgeries in the last 3 years. So shout out to Honeywell continuing to grind. I know that rehab process can be very tedious and very draining mentally, so I'm certainly rooting for the kid to get back here. Adam Engel for the White Sox. He left a game earlier this week due to a strained right hamstring. Tony La Russa said he'll be out a couple of weeks, and Engel, he fell to the ground, stayed down there after some time, limped off the field, but again, he's going to miss a couple of weeks and not be ready for opening day there for the White Sox. And then lastly, Josh Naylor for the Cleveland Indians. He was held out of the lineup a couple times this week due to right wrist soreness. Terry Francona said it was precautionary, and he does think he's going to be ready for opening day. But anytime you're dealing with soreness or issues, you certainly want to be a little precautious and make sure the guy has the time to come back and he's feeling healthy with opening day approaching us once again here. So injuries across the board, some good news, some guys returning, some guys going to be out for extended periods of time here, but that's part of baseball, right? Who's going to stay healthy? Who's going to be dealing with injuries all year? And that could certainly play out to ultimately where teams finish in the standings here in 2021. But that'll do it here for segment number 1 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll step aside here now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we're going to talk about these rankings, 1 through 25, the top players in baseball currently. Did ESPN get them right? Stick around and find out.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, and thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. If you guys could do me a favor, head to social media. Check out the GSMC Baseball Podcast page on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Please go to Twitter, GSMC Baseball. We're keeping you guys up to date with everything happening across baseball out there. And with opening day approaching, less than a week away, there is more and more quality information coming out about injuries, reactions to games, what's taking place, giving our opinions, our takes on what's happening. It's a lot of fun to give us a follow there on Twitter, so if you could head that way, we'd certainly appreciate it. And then on Facebook as well. I know Facebook isn't as popular these days with the younger crowd, but if you guys have a page, which I know you do, just type in GSMC Baseball into that search bar and you'll be taken to our page. Give us a like, a subscribe, a follow, whatever it is on there. We certainly appreciate it. Myself, as well as the other hosts of the baseball podcast that are coming at you daily, we'll be keeping you guys up to date every day on the latest of what's taking place. But here in segment number 2, I wanted to talk to you guys about the rankings 1 through 100, player rankings that ESPN recently released. Wanted to give my take on the information, see what you guys think at the top of the list. Now, there isn't a lot to discuss when you're at the very top of the list because the top players in baseball are pretty universally respected and known. But as you go down the list a bit further, there are a couple that I may potentially would have rearranged. And some guys who I think ultimately got disrespected throughout the list. But Mike Trout, LA Angels, he's number one. Of course, he's still the best player in baseball right now. He finished top 5 in AL MVP voting for the 9th year in a row, even though it was his worst season since he made his debut almost a decade ago. So the guy's worst season in the bigs is still a top 5 MVP style of season. So if you guys get a chance to watch Mike Trout, I know he's on the West Coast, kind of upsets me here in the Philadelphia area. I don't get to see him play as much as I would like to. But if you can stay up later, you're located out west, do yourself a favor and just tune into Angels games, especially when Trout's hitting. And it's just magnificent to watch that swing, and especially how he punishes baseballs when they're down in the zone. Number 2 is Mookie Betts. He is up from number 5 last season. So he climbed in the rankings. He is very impressive for the Dodgers, obviously switching leagues last year. But there was no slowing him down. He was fantastic for the Dodgers. He's got a 38.4 wins above replacement from 2015 through 2020. And again, that is only second to Mike Trout across that list. So Mookie Betts, young, fantastic out there in L.A., and just a joy to watch. Number 3, not a surprise for me. Honestly, I think this kid is this good. But Juan Soto of the Washington Nationals jumps up from number 11 to number 3. And the comparisons to Ted Williams aren't that far off. I mean, Williams hit 344 as a 21-year-old. Soto hit 351. Now, yes, it was different amount of games there, and Williams went on to hit 406 as a 22-year-old. But the fact of the matter is that Soto may be the next guy to hit close to 400, just with the way he's able to locate pitches out of pitchers' hands. He doesn't chase things out of the zone, and he may be the best overall hitter in baseball. The more people you talk to, the more you see Barry Bonds in this kid's swing. Doesn't chase pitches, gets into hitters' counts, and then jumps all over mistakes from pitchers. And that's where I think this kid could win MVP in the National League here in 2021. Number 4 on the list, Ronald Acuna Jr. Maybe a bit high for Acuna, but, I mean, the kid's fantastic. He's up from number 8 ranked last year. Yes, I don't know. I wouldn't have him number 4, but ultimately top 10, absolutely. I mean, he's due for a payday here coming up. They already signed him 8 years, $100 million, and he is extremely underpaid. So it'll just be interesting to see how he continues to develop as only a 23-year-old. I mean, just the age of these kids who are the top in baseball. Betts is young. Soto's young. Acuna's young. It is just fascinating to see these kids play at such a high level for such a difficult sport like baseball. Now, number 5 and number 6 is where the starting pitchers come in. And honestly, I would have flip-flopped them. I mean, they have Garrett Cole at number 5, down from number 2, and then Jacob deGrom at number 6, down from number 3. I think deGrom's the best pitcher in baseball, so I think that puts him above Garrett Cole. Yes, Cole's fantastic. I mean, he had, a down year last year by his standards, and he had a 2.84 ERA for the Yankees and 94 strikeouts over 73 innings, but Jacob deGrom had a down year as well. I mean, he finished 3rd in the Cy Young after winning back-to-back awards, but deGrom just pumping in 101, 102. His velocity continues to increase. I think he's the best pitcher in baseball, so I would put him above Garrett Cole in this list, probably flip-flop them at 5 and 6. Number 7, Freddie Freeman. He's up from 17th a year ago. Of course, he hit 341 and won the MVP in 2020, so he was certainly going to climb in the list. Now, can he replicate that? We'll see. I certainly think he's a 300 hitter, but 341 was just fantastic. Not a ton of strikeouts, huge OBP guy, certainly fantastic. Number 8, Fernando Tatis Jr. He's a little bit high for me on this list. I mean, yes, he is fantastic. He is probably top 15 in my books, but going from number 41 all the way to number 8 for a guy that's only played one full season worth of games to already have $340 million, I think it's just a bit early for that. I mean, a career 300 hitter, 7.0 wins above replacement, not even 22 years old. I mean, the kid's fantastic and he's the future, but I don't believe he's number 8 just quite yet I think there's a couple of other shortstops I would have ahead of him in the list. And one of those guys comes in at number 10, but Christian Yelich is number 9. He falls to 9 from number 4. Of course, really struggled last year, but I think he's going to bounce back, have a fantastic season this year. I just think the coronavirus, he went through a bit of a slump, probably pressed a little bit, tried to do too much to get out of it, and really couldn't find himself. But over the course of 162, I think he'll be just fine once again up there in Milwaukee. Number 10, you got Francisco Lindor. He stays put. He was 10 last year. He's 10 this year. I mean, he's a 2-time Gold Glover, 4-time All-Star. He hit a career low 258 last year. But again, I mean, he had distractions in Cleveland. They weren't bringing him back. He was looking for a new contract. Where am I going to play in the future? Are you guys going to trade me? What's happening? So a lot going on for Lindor. And I think that led to his down year. And he's going to be certainly very solid in New York. Number 11, Nolan Arenado. I think this is right where he should be. He played through some injury issues last year, had some shoulder pain, which meant he only hit 253. So he was one of those guys that struggled a little bit with the shortened season, but I think he'll be fantastic. And now that he's found a home in St. Louis with an organization that's going to put things behind him, he'll be just fine there in St. Louis. Cody Bellinger falls from number 6 to number 12. He's got all 5 tools. I mean, the swing is fantastic. He did deal with some injuries at the end of last year. He only hit 233 in the postseason because of it, so that's why he dropped. But it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back. Now you're starting to get into this middle tier where there could be some fluctuation in regards to the rankings. I mean, number 13, they have Alex Bregman. Bregman's very good, but I mean, I don't know if he's 13th. They had him ranked 12 last year. He had a little bit of a down year. I mean, he didn't have that same swagger he had in Houston. They struggled a little bit as a team, obviously turned it on in the playoffs, but I think this year is a big year for Bregman in showing that he's one of these elite offensive talents and not just above average for Houston. Shane Bieber jumps from number 40 to number 14, of course. Had one of the best years ever as a pitcher, 1.63 ERA in 12 starts. Ran away with the Cy Young Award, so no complaints there. Number 15, Anthony Rendon. I mean, if you're the Angels, you got number 1 and number 15 on the list. That's exactly what you're looking for. But Rendon struck out 24 more times than he walked. He hit .307, Gold Glove defense. So I think Rendon's right where he needs to be, kind of in this second tier offensively. Now you got Trevor Bauer. He made the biggest jump out of anybody. He jumped from 88th up to 16th, obviously because of his Cy Young Award-winning season, then signed a 3-year, $100 million contract year to year with the Dodgers, so it'll be fascinating to see if he can replicate that. 17, Jose Ramirez for Cleveland. Of course, this guy, he just continues to hit for power, hit for average. He's been third, and second in the MVP voting the past 3 years, so very good, no problems there. Walker Buehler, starting pitcher for the Dodgers, comes in at number 18. Again, he was excellent last year, so no complaints. DJ LeMahieu at 19, he jumps up from 57. Again, winning the batting title in the American League, one of only a couple of guys to do it in both leagues. No issue with me with putting LeMahieu here. And then 20 through 25, you got Manny Machado, who jumped from number 50 all the way up to number 20. He's probably a little bit too high for me on this list. I mean, he's a fantastic player, but there's a couple of guys here next on the list that I may put ahead of him. Number 21, Max Scherzer. I still think he's excellent. Him falling from 7 to 21, bit of a disservice to Scherzer. I think he bounces back and will be just fine. Corey Seager jumps from 78 to 22. That's too high for Corey Seager. I mean, Corey Seager's an excellent player, NLCS MVP, World Series MVP. He's going to be a free agent in a contract year, so I think he's going to perform, but no way is he 22. Trevor Story at 23, probably a little bit high for me there as well. I mean, with nobody else to help him in Colorado, I think he may have a bit of a down year as pitchers look to pitch around him. Guys like Aaron Judge at number 24, I would have above those two shortstops, and Bryce Harper for the Phillies. He came in at 25 last year, stays at 25. He dealt with the back issue last year, still contributed with 13 home runs. I would put both of those guys ahead of Seager and Story when it comes to this list. So now looking at 26 through 50. Again, a lot of second-tier guys. I'll kind of run through them a little bit quicker, but Trey Turner at number 26, way too high for me. I mean, he went from 60 to 26. He's probably about 50 in my opinion. I mean, the kid hit 335 last year and 12 home runs, so certainly had a fantastic year. But I just don't see Trey Turner at the top of that list when it comes to these rankings. JT Realmuto, the best catcher in baseball, comes in at number 27. I mean, it just kind of goes to show you how devalued the catching position is, that the number one catcher is behind about 5-6 shortstops in this list. And he fell from 23 to 27 and basically had a great year last year. So a bit low for me there. George Springer, Matt Chapman, and Steven Strasburg round out the top 30. Springer jumped up 9 in the rankings, and then Chapman and Strasburg both fell after subpar years last year. But Lucas Giolito coming in at number 31. Yeah, that's probably a bit low for me in my rankings. I would have him higher, probably close to 24, 25. I mean, the guy's figured it out over the last couple of years. He's thrown no-hitters. What more can you ask for when it comes to these particular rankings? Now you got Clayton Kershaw at number 32. I mean, he's losing fastball velocity, but he's still shoving as a pitcher, so no issues there. He's followed by a couple of more shortstops. You got Tim Anderson of the White Sox. He goes from unranked all the way up to 33rd. Is that a bit too high for him? Potentially. I mean, he hit 335 and 322 the last couple of years, so he's shown a bit of consistency there. You got Carlos Correa at number 34, who's up from number 49. He's going into a contract season, so he'll be motivated. Ozzie Albies at number 35, followed by Blake Snell at number 36. Snell, he's probably a bit too high for me, the fact that he only goes 5 innings. If he can go to that 6 or 7 inning mark now that he's a Padre, and if they let him go the third time through the order, I think I'll be a bit more impressed with what he's bringing. But he's followed by Yu Darvish, who had a bounce-back year last year, jumped from number 80 up to number 37 when it comes to the rankings. Behind him is Jack Flaherty and Tyler Glasnow, a couple of starting pitchers who have excellent stuff. Number 40, Marcelo Zuna, a big jump here as he goes from unranked up to number 40 based on the offensive year that he had in Atlanta. Don't see any qualms there, but we could see that drop again now that he's going to have to play left field day in and day out. Bo Bichette comes in at number 41. He's up from 95. This kid's going to be the real deal, so it'll be interesting to see ultimately how high he can go in these rankings. And rounding out from 40 to 50 here, we got number 42, Xander Bogaerts. He falls from number 28, another shortstop, as shortstops are all over this list. I mean, it is just excellent. But number 43, Jose Abreu. The guy was unranked last year and won the MVP. So I still think he's too low at number 43. Number 44, Javier Baez. Again, shortstop, fell from 21 to 44. I would probably put him higher on this list, and based on the shortstop rankings, probably have him ahead of guys like Correa, even Story, in my opinion, with the upside that he can bring. Number 45, Paul Goldschmidt, first baseman of the Cardinals. Number 46, Luis Castillo from the Cincinnati Reds. You got Rafael Devers, third baseman of the Red Sox. Pete Alonso slips from number 20 to number 48 after he hit 53 home runs in 2019. He struggled last year, but number 49, Gleyber Torres, another shortstop. And then number 50, Hyun-Jin Ryu jumps from 94 up to 50. So what do you guys think of the top 50? Who were the names left out? Who wasn't on the list that you guys would put on the list? I mean, if I just look at the rest of them, who do you got? Aaron Nola, Luis Robert, Conforto, Rizzo, Yastrzemski, Woodruff, Fried, Muncy, Martell, Josh Donaldson, Marcus Semien, Whit Merrifield. Who do you guys think should be in the top 50? Kenta Maeda, Soraka, Giancarlo Stanton. Who do you think should be on the list that ultimately didn't make the top 50, or who was overseeded or underseeded, to use some March Madness terms here? But that'll do it for segment number 2 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of the rankings. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll certainly share your thoughts if you guys put a couple of comments and 5-star reviews down there. So we'll step aside here now for another word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows, but when we come back, I'm going to talk to you guys about college baseball. What happened this past weekend? Was there any movement? Stick around, find out.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you guys haven't liked, rated, and reviewed the podcast, what are you waiting for? Please do myself a favor. Scroll down. If you're on Apple Podcasts, all you got to do is flick up with your thumb. Hit that star all the way on the right. Give us a 5-star rating. And if you want to leave a comment, leave a question, write a review, give us some feedback. We're all certainly open to it here, whether it's myself or any of the other hosts on the podcast. Tell us how much you love us. Tell us how much you hate us. Either way, we want to hear from you guys out there. And if you leave a comment, I'll read it here on the show. If you're on Spotify, hit like, hit subscribe. That way, when the content releases every day for you guys, it'll be pushed right to your phone. You hit that refresh button on your podcast link, and boom, you got today's episode right there on your phone. As it certainly goes a long way for helping us continue to climb up the charts, because I listen to some other baseball content from some national providers, national news outlets, and a lot of the feedback isn't great on the baseball pods and the information they provide. So if you guys give us those ratings, that'll help us climb up those charts when people are looking for great quality baseball podcasts. And based on your feedback and our 5-star rating that we have so far, this will certainly help us continue to grow and spread the word. As again, opening day only a week away. Let the people know out there, if you want to stay up to date with everything baseball, check out GSMC. So please like, rate, and review the podcast. I certainly appreciate your help out there. But let's talk a little college baseball as well. I know you guys, you're probably Major League Baseball fans, but if you're like me, you enjoy the college game as well. Myself, playing at a Division I level, playing against some of these teams, playing at some of these stadiums, I just love kind of following along and seeing that next wave of Major League Baseball as well, or next wave of talent coming up through the ranks in college. Who should you be looking out for? What's going on? So there was a bit of a shakeup in the rankings. Nothing huge when it comes to ultimately moves, but we got ourselves a new number 1 team, and that is the Vanderbilt Commodores. They had a 3-1 week last week. They went 2-1 in their weekend series against South Carolina. They won Game 1 3-2. Game 2 they won 5-0, and there was a no-hitter thrown by Jack Leiter, and that is Al Leiter's son. And you guys should watch some of the interviews he's done with some other baseball outlets on YouTube, talking about the mental approach of pitching, and his stuff is fantastic. This guy is absolutely skyrocketing up the draft boards. Certainly a first-round talent. I think he's now into the top 10, top 5 when it comes to guys potentially being taken. High 90s fastball, above-average breaking ball. He's got excellent stuff, and it shows with a no-hitter against a very good South Carolina Gamecock team. But ultimately, South Carolina came back, won Game 3, but still the difference in Vanderbilt being able to climb to that number 1 spot and take advantage of the number 2 team, the Arkansas Razorbacks, who were previously number 1. They had themselves a 2-2 week last week. They lost a midweek game to Oklahoma by a score of 8-5, and then they did win the weekend series against Alabama 2-1, but they lose Game 1 by a score of 16-1. So the ace pitcher for Arkansas really struggled Friday night against Alabama, giving up not all 16, but a ton of runs. Now, they did bounce back, win Game 2 by a score of 9-1, Game 3 by a score of 3-1, and then they've beaten Memphis earlier this week in a midweek game. But this upcoming weekend series they have against Mississippi State is really going to show us what they're made of, because Mississippi State comes in right behind them, ranked number 3 in the country. They hold steady at number 3. They were 3-1 this past week. They took 2 out of 3 from LSU. They won games 1 and 2 by scores of 6-1 and 3-0. Game 3, they lost 8-3, as LSU obviously gets a little bit desperate, not wanting to be swept. And ultimately, so, I mean, hey, Arkansas, Mississippi State, if you're a college baseball fan, somehow figure out how to watch this one. I think a couple are going to be carried on the SEC network out there. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, number 2 versus number 3 in SEC conference play, as this is weekend number 2 in the SEC where they're in conference play. It's certainly going to show us if both of these teams are for real moving forward, because the SEC, it's clearly the top conference in baseball. I mean, they got the teams ranked 1 through 5. Ole Miss or Mississippi comes in at number 4. They're 3-0 in conference play. They swept Auburn this past weekend. Game 1 was a pitcher's duel, and Game 3 was an offensive juggernaut. Game 1, they won 1-0. Game 2 was 6-5, and then Game 3 by a score of 19-11. So both offenses took advantage of Game 3 pitching, but ultimately Ole Miss was able to outlast Auburn, and they took all 3 games. They'll take on Alabama this upcoming weekend, so it'll be a nice series as Ole Miss, Alabama go at it here for conference play. Florida is at number 5 after a sweep in the SEC this weekend. They took all 3 games from Texas A&M. They did lose a midweek game to Florida State, a rivalry game, 10-2, but bounced back, took all 3 from A&M, 13-4, 3-1, and 8-4 were the scores of that sweep. And now they'll go up against South Carolina, who's coming off that series against Vanderbilt. So no rest for South Carolina when it comes to their schedule and opening up SEC play. But top 5 still SEC, but a new number 1, Vanderbilt, jumps Arkansas here moving forward. Now, number 6, we go to Texas Tech. They were 3-1 this past week. They continue to perform in the Big 12. They started play out 2-1 this weekend, taking 2 out of 3 against Oklahoma State. They lost Game 1 by a score of 2-0, but bounced back with a 4-2 and 6-5 victory. Now they'll jump back out of conference this weekend, playing South Florida before they return against Kansas State and TCU. But Texas Tech at 16-4 overall, the best team certainly in the Big 12, it looks like. Louisville, they come in at 7-2 at number 7 in the ACC. They swept NC State this weekend, so they're figuring things out after they lost 2 of 3 to Georgia Tech, but since then they've won 6 straight ACC games. Now they'll get another nice test as they travel to Notre Dame, who we're going to hear later in the rankings. So the ACC will have a nice matchup of ranked teams coming at you a little bit later. But Louisville, the top-ranked ACC team at number 7. Number 8, you have East Carolina, the first non-Power 5 team coming at you. They are 16-4. They haven't started conference play yet in the American Athletic Conference, but swept Illinois State this weekend. They did lose to North Carolina. So, again, kind of shows you where they may stack up when it comes to Power 5s. But a weekend series against St. John's will allow them to open conference play and kind of get back on track there. Texas Longhorns come in at number 9. They continue to climb. They are up from number 10. After a 2-1 weekend in conference play, they took 2 out of 3 against Baylor, winning Game 1 by a score of 5-3, Game 2 4-3, before ultimately losing Game 3 11-2. And they got a nice weekend series coming up against Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry, coming at you baseball style as Oklahoma travels down south to take on Texas and the 9th-ranked Longhorns. Number 10, you have UCLA. They are up from number 11 in the rankings. They're 2-1 overall in conference play. They took 2 out of 3 from Arizona this past weekend. They won Game 1 3-2, lost Game 2 7-3, and then the rubber match on Sunday, they were able to win by a score of 11-3 to continue to produce for them. Now they travel to Southern California. They'll take on USC this weekend in a nice Pac-10 matchup before they head to Washington in the coming weeks here. Now, number 11, Georgia Tech. They moved back up after a tough weekend last weekend. They were able to win 2 out of 3 in conference play against Wake Forest this weekend. They lost Game 3 against Pitt last weekend, lose Game 1, so a 2-game losing streak, but turn it around. And their pitching staff ultimately is the culprit, right? So only gave up 1 run in Games 2 and 3 after giving up a total of 24 the 2 games prior in conference play. So Georgia Tech righting the ship a little bit, previously in the top 10, but now finds themselves at number 11. Number 12 is the Tennessee Volunteers. They're 17-4. They opened conference play, winning 2 out of 3 against Georgia. They won Game 1 11-6, lost Game 2 5-4, and then won the rubber match by a score of 4-1. So Tennessee has a nice weekend with LSU coming up here. LSU also we'll see in the rankings here in a minute. TCU, another Big 12 team. They're coming in at 13-7. They have yet to get into conference play. They'll open up conference play this coming weekend with a trip from Baylor. Baylor will travel to TCU to get them underway after they won 2 out of 3 against Louisiana this past weekend. So we'll learn more about the Horned Frogs here in the coming weeks. Notre Dame at number 14. They're 9-3 in the ACC. They won 2 out of 3 against Duke this past weekend. That ended a, 8-game conference winning streak. They won games 1 and 2 before losing game 3 by a score of 2-0. But Notre Dame is certainly an early surprise in the ACC. There's a couple surprises in the ACC, and the 15th ranked Pitt Panthers are one of those teams as well. This is the highest ranking they've ever had in program history. They continue to have quality road wins due to the location up in Pennsylvania. They haven't even played a home game yet, but they're 8-4 in the ACC. They took 2 out of 3 at Virginia this past weekend. They won games 1 and 2 by a score of 2-1 and 6-2 before a rally for Virginia in Game 3 gave the Cavaliers a 10-4 victory. Now, like I mentioned, they'll have their first home series of the year against Virginia Tech coming up this weekend up in Pittsburgh, but being ranked 15th is a surprise for a Pitt team that was picked at the bottom half of the ACC when it came to the preseason rankings. The Oregon Ducks are at number 16. They had a 2-1 weekend here against Arizona State. They won games 2 and 3 after dropping the opener, so they were able to bounce back and right the ship and continue to stay in the rankings. They jumped up from number 20 all the way to number 16. And then number 17, Florida State has rejoined the rankings. Again, they had a tough start. They were swept by Pitt earlier in the year, but recently they've won 5 in a row, including a sweep at Miami. So that's a huge weekend win. Miami, Florida State, a huge rivalry in the ACC, and they absolutely dominated the Hurricanes. 13-1, 9-1, and 12-0 at Miami. They went into Miami and absolutely kicked tail, which obviously put them back up into number 17 and, really jump-started this program after a tough start. Now, Michigan, they're at number 18. They continue to climb in the rankings, up from number 22. They had a 2-2 week last week. The Big Ten schedule is a little bit funky because they are only playing conference games. No out-of-conference games for the Big Ten. I mean, the Athletic Conference, the American Athletic Conference, hasn't played a conference game yet, and here you are in the Big Ten. So they split with Illinois, and they split with Michigan State, and now they have 3 coming up at Penn State this weekend. But Michigan, 2-1 this past week, 2-2 overall, and they're up at number 18. Now, number 19, all the way from number 6, is the Miami Hurricanes. They are 5-6 in ACC play. I talked to you guys about the spanking they took with Florida State, but they had won 6 straight previous to that. So again, shout out to Florida State for doing what they did down there in Miami. And I've played at Miami. That's a tough place to go and win. It's a fantastic complex, a great field, but what Florida State did, certainly no easy task. The Oklahoma State ball team, they come in at 1-2 in Big 12 play. They fell from number 14 down to number 20 after they lost 2 out of 3 to Texas Tech. They dropped another midweek game, so they've lost 3 straight now at Oklahoma State and certainly trending in the wrong direction here. Oregon State, they had a 2-1 week up to number 21 from number 23 as they opened Pac-12 play. Taking 2 out of 3 from Washington State. They lost game 1, but bounced back with some nice wins in games 2 and 3, including a 9-8 victory on the Sunday game to give them the series victory. Number 22, the LSU Tigers. They fall from number 19 to 22. They lost 2 out of 3 to Mississippi State, but that's a top 5 Mississippi State team, so not a ton to shake your head out there if you're a Tiger fan. Louisiana Tech enters the rankings after being unranked last week. They had themselves a 4-0 week and have won 6 straight games. They swept Tulane, and now they head to Southern Mississippi to open conference play. Southern Mississippi, another fun place to play that I've played in my career. The North Carolina Tar Heels at number 24 back in the rankings after coming in and out. They were able to take 2 out of 3 against Boston College for their conference play. They're at 8-4 in the ACC, and they get NC State coming up next year as a nice rivalry between Carolina and NC State. Finally, at number 25, South Carolina drops all the way from number 16 after losing 2 out of 3 to Vanderbilt, and they got swept by Texas the week before. So they had lost 6 straight games until Game 3 against Vanderbilt, and then a midweek victory for them. But 12-6 overall after a 12-1 start. A tough pill to swallow if you're a Gamecock fan. Now, 3 teams fell from the rankings. UC Santa Barbara, they dropped out after being ranked 21st. They split with Cal State Fullerton, but lost games 3 and 4, ultimately to fall out of the rankings. You also had Boston College, who was ranked highest in program history earlier during their time here, but after being swept by Louisville and then losing 2 out of 3 to North Carolina, they are no longer in the rankings. And then finally, the Virginia Tech Hokies have dropped out after being ranked 25th due to losing 2 out of 3 to Clemson and 2 out of 3 to Florida State the past couple of weeks. But that'll wrap up our college baseball conversation. A lot of good stories, including Notre Dame and Pittsburgh, and then some other teams starting to fall after Miami having themselves a tough week here. But we're going to step aside here one last time at the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And when we come back, let's wrap up Major League Baseball spring training. Where do teams currently stand with 1 week left of games here as we head to the regular season? So stick around, everyone. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back after this.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the 4th and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Have you guys checked out any other shows within the network? I mean, do it. Honestly, they're fantastic. There's like 20, 25 different shows within the podcast network. You got fitness, you got business, you got marketing, you got sports, baseball, obviously you're listening to, fantasy football, basketball, whatever it is, politics, news, books, movies, whatever you're into, there's a podcast for you guys to check out. So how do you guys find these episodes? Wherever you're listening to this show, go to that little search icon. Usually it's a magnifying glass, either at the bottom or the top of the screen. Type in GSMC, and it'll take you to all the different shows that we have to offer. And there are fantastic hosts within the podcast network that we interact with, bringing you guys great content. You have health and fitness. If you're looking at new ways to diet or new workout routines or new motivation, check out those episodes. If you're looking at new books to read, there's book review podcasts. I mean, it is a ton of fun to just broaden your horizons, check out different hobbies, different things that you're into. If it's not just sports, don't worry about it. GSMC's got you covered. So do yourself a favor and type in that into, GSMC into that search icon, and you'll be good to go here moving forward. So I appreciate you guys listening in. 4th and final segment. We got a good one for you, as I'm going to keep you up to date on how the standings are currently playing out across spring training. I mean, when things start, okay, there's a lot of guys who aren't going to make the ball club that are pitching, that are playing. So, let's look at how things are progressing here as we head towards the regular season. And, we'll talk about, does it mean anything, right? Like in the Grapefruit League, which is the Florida league here when it comes to either Florida or Arizona, but the Miami Marlins are 10-5 with a plus 12 run differential. Now, is there anything to this? And honestly, I just think it shows that Miami's pitching staff is the real deal. I mean, Alcantara's been fantastic. Sixto Sanchez has made his debut, and he looked good, touching 100 miles an hour. You got Lopez in the rotation. So the offense may leave some to be desired. I mean, 80 runs in 15 games, not a ton when it comes to potential offensively, but only allowing 68 runs in 15 games. I mean, that's just over 4 runs a game that this entire pitching staff is allowing, and it just goes to show that maybe Miami can scare some people again in the NL East. I mean, myself, a lot of pundits out there have them finishing 5th behind the Nationals, the Mets, the Phillies, the Braves, but they were a playoff team in 2020, and if they get hot and have a little confidence down in South Beach, they could be another team to mess with coming up here in 2021. Now, the second-ranked team, the New York Yankees, they are 13-7 with a plus 8 run differential. And honestly, New York, I think they're starting to get healthy. They're starting to feel better about themselves. Aaron Nola shut them down the other nights when it came to their outing, or his outing, one of his last ones of the spring. So as a Phillies fan, super happy to see that start to pan out because his ERA had been way too high up until that start. But the Yankees trying to get their footing offensively, still finding their way a little bit, and they're still 13-7 here in the spring. Now, Toronto at 13-8, their offense has been excellent. They've scored 105 runs in 21 games. So, what is that, 5 runs per game, right on the mark, while only allowing 70 runs in 20-some games. So, scoring 5, giving up only 3 and change for a plus 35 run differential. That is the best plus-minus in the Grapefruit League. And, man, I think this Toronto team could be the real deal. Now, we talked about it at the top of the show. Kirby Yates missing the 2021 season due to a possible Tommy John surgery is a big blow to their bullpen. It'll be fascinating to see if they make any changes or any additions to the bullpen based on this injury. But I certainly think they're going to be good regardless. And then offensively, George Springer, if he can stay healthy and if he's not out for an extended period of time, this offense is going to be fun to watch for Toronto when we get to regular season play. The Boston Red Sox, they're a surprise at 12-8, and it's this team's offense. 128 runs in 20 games. Over 5 runs a game in the 128 runs scored is tops in the Grapefruit League. Now, they've also given up 105 runs, which is third worst in the Grapefruit League. So this team's going to have to outscore people. I mean, offensively, Xander Bogaerts, Devers, they're going to have to out-hit this pitching staff, especially until Chris Sale comes around. Nathan Eovaldi figures things out, but them winning ball games with offense, if they can keep that up in the regular season, maybe they could be a surprise team in the American League East. The New York Mets at 10-8. They are low scoring, 86 runs for, 74 against, plus 12 in the run differential. Obviously, the top end of that rotation has been excellent. Stroman, DeGrom, they've been fantastic. Carrasco still out with an injury, and the offense still finding its way. And Pete Alonso, I think, is going to be a key component as to whether or not the Mets are the real deal this year. If he hits 53 home runs again, it's going to be hard to not see this team competing for the NL East title. The Washington Nationals, they haven't played a ton of games. They're only 8-7 this spring, but they do have a -5 run differential. So the pitching staff leaving a little bit to be desired in Washington, and that's probably their biggest bugaboo. I mean, the starting rotation I am high on. I love the Scherzer, Lester, Corbin, Strasburg combination, but offensively, I don't know if they have enough to compete. Now, they added Bell at first base, Trey Turner coming off a huge year, Juan Soto, so the names are there. Kyle Schwarber, they are there. It's just a matter of can they put it all together, and I think they will come regular season time. The Atlanta Braves at 11-10. They've given up 91 runs this spring. That's tough for them, only scoring 94 for +3. So the pitching staff dealing with some injuries, trying to figure it out at the front of that rotation. Are the kids going to be as good this year as they were last year? It'll be interesting to find out. But the Pittsburgh Pirates at 11-10 and scoring 108 runs is a huge surprise. I mean, that's the second most runs scored in the Grapefruit League for a plus 13 run differential. And I couldn't tell you anybody else on the offensive side besides Ke'Bryan Hayes, who I think is going to contribute this year. So them scoring 108 runs certainly has me opening my eyes going, wow, okay, maybe the kids in Pittsburgh are going to be able to hit a little bit. And we're kind of, undervaluing the young talent that they're going to have at PNC Park when it comes to this summer. Now below them, you got St. Louis at 7-7, only playing 14 games, but also giving up 101 runs. I mean, that is too many in 14 games. That is a pitching staff that has not put it together. They are a -10 in run differential. And again, if they can't straighten things out on the mound by the time the regular season comes around, it's going to be a long year in St. Louis. The Philadelphia Phillies, 10-11. They are -7 run differential, and they hammered the team 10-1 the one time. So it could be way worse than that. And it's just the pitching for Philadelphia again. The starting pitching has not been great. The bullpen guys have been very good. It's almost like a complete opposite of last year, right? The starters were good. The bullpen stank. Well, this year the bullpen's been solid, but Nola's struggling. Wheeler's struggling. Eflin's been in and out of the lineup. So we need the pitching staff to figure things out if you're a Phillies fan. The Tigers at 9-11, -1 run differential. They've certainly exceeded expectations when it comes to this spring in performance. But the Minnesota Twins at 9-11 with a -22 run differential. That's second worst or third worst in the Grapefruit League, only behind the Baltimore Orioles, who are at 8-13 at -27. They've allowed 120 runs, which is the most in the Grapefruit League. Tampa Bay at 7-14, very much a surprise because with their pitching staff and their depth when it comes to their minor league system, not great at a -25. And then Houston at 4-12 has certainly been the biggest disappointment. And if you're a Houston fan, you're going, nope, can't take anything from spring training. We're just going to wash it clean and flick the switch like we did for the playoffs last year. But now talking about the Cactus League, let's go out to Arizona. Kansas City continues to play great baseball. 13-6. They got 128 runs in 19 games. Their offense has been fantastic. That's the most in the Cactus League offensively. A +20 run differential. Certainly very impressive for the Royals. And next you got the Cubs at 12-7. They got 113 runs and a +11 run differential. So the Cubs offense continuing to swing it well. And if they can do that during the regular season, it'll be interesting to see if they can push St. Louis and Milwaukee for the Central title. The Texas Rangers at 11-8. That's a surprise. They have a -6 run differential, but they're winning close games and losing by a lot when they do. So I don't think that's a pattern that will, consistently transition into the regular season. Milwaukee at 12-9. They have 120 runs. That's tied for second in Cactus League action, and they have a +24 run differential, which is the best for the Cactus League. So only allowing 96 runs, doing a nice job with that pitching staff while the offense continues to come around in Milwaukee. And the additions they made, Lorenzo Cain back. You got Jackie Bradley Jr. on the squad now. You got Colton Wong at second base. They could be sneaky good in the NL Central. The LA Dodgers, 10-8. They've given up 97 runs, but they have scored 110. So that offense isn't going anywhere. But the pitching staff allowing 97 runs could be cause for concern if you're a Dodgers fan here, and we'll see how that translates early into the start of the regular season. The Seattle Mariners at 10-8, but they have a -8 run differential. So giving up 111 runs, which is a lot. It looks like, not the most in the Cactus League, but a lot. So the pitching staff a concern if you're a Mariners fan. Now looking at the Angels, 11-9, scoring 121 runs, but also giving up 116. So high-scoring games for the Angels thus far. Shohei Ohtani's been good. Anthony Rendon's been good, but that pitching staff could be their bugaboo again as they get into the regular season. Now the Oakland A's, they're 11-9, but they have a +16 run differential. They've only allowed 96 runs. So their staff looks to be in good shape, and they're going to get guys back off at injury here. A.J. Puck as well as some others here, and they should be in fine shape out in the American League West. Colorado at 10-11, a bit of a surprise considering they're -13 run differential, allowing 130 runs, which was the second most in the Grapefruit League. San Francisco at 9-10. They've allowed 117 runs, a -10 run differential, so their pitching staff continues to struggle early on here. If you're a Giants fan, look for some upgrades in the rotation, potentially if they start the regular season well. San Diego, 9-11 with a +12 run differential. So they've lost some close games and won some blowouts, scoring 106 runs, allowing 94, but winning some of those close games. Again, that's going to have to be a thing that they'll figure out once the regular season rolls around, but they either win big or lose close. And obviously, if you're a Padres fan, you'd like to see a few more of those close victories go in your favor in the regular season. The White Sox have picked it up a little bit. They are now 8-10, but their offense hasn't come around yet. They've only scored 87 runs in those 18 games, which is the fewest in the Cactus League by about 14 runs, it looks like. So that offense that seems to be a juggernaut and the one I think is going to be fantastic hasn't hit yet in Arizona. The pitching staff has been excellent, only allowing 89 runs, which is the fewest in the Cactus League. So if that offense can start to figure things out, start to hit the ball a little bit, the White Sox are going to be just fine because that pitching staff looks to be locked in. The Arizona Diamondbacks are 7-11. They have a -8 run differential. I don't see that improving much as they get to the regular season. Now, Madison Bumgarner has been very good for Arizona this spring, which, again, is a bit of a surprise to me because I think he's getting close to kind of running out of bullets here as he gets to the tail end of his career. The Cleveland Indians, 8-15, -19 run differential, 131 runs allowed. Second most in the Arizona League here. That pitching staff, man, I don't see it coming around by opening day, so I think it could be a long summer when it comes to Cleveland. And then Cincinnati, -35 run differential, 6-15. So in 21 games, they've allowed 142 runs. That's like 6.5 runs a game, if not more, based on my quick math. Now, they've scored 107, so they're hitting the ball well. But that staff in Cincinnati, man, I mean, losing Trevor Bauer, Sonny Gray, he's been out with an injury. Besides Luis Castillo, they haven't had much success out there limiting runs. And 142 would certainly be the most by far when it comes to both leagues here and their pitching staff. So Kansas City, Chicago, and Texas certainly surprises at the top of the Cactus League, as well as Miami, Toronto, and Boston being at the top of the Grapefruit League. A bit of a surprise here early on. But again, can't take a lot away from spring training. Now, as we get closer to opening day here, the last week or so, teams are starting to make final cuts. So I would implore you, whichever team you're a fan of, check out Google. Check out the latest roster moves that they are making so you guys can stay up to date with the latest position battles, ultimately who's winning those as we come down the stretch and guys start to go deeper into games, starting pitchers start to go deeper into games, starters will start to get more at-bats, and you'll see less turnover when it comes to guys playing here. But that'll do it for today's episode. We had a fantastic episode for you guys once again today. We talked about the injuries across Major League Baseball. Then I talked to you guys about college baseball as well. We talked about the player rankings, 1 through 50. Who do you think was left out? Who should be higher or who should be lower? And then, of course, updating you guys on spring training as we are now a week away from opening day. So I'll ask you one last time before I sign off. Please rate and review the podcast. Be a friend, tell a friend, share us with your buddies. Send a text message, those 3 little dots. It'll take you to share. Hit text. Text us out there. We certainly appreciate it as we continue to grow and spread the love here within the GSMC Podcast Network. But I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Thanks again for listening, everyone. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend, and I'll talk to everybody once again on Monday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.